Hello, welcome to Optimize for Humans. My name is Usha. I'm your podcast host. I'm an executive coach and consultant, and in this podcast, we explore AI transformation and how to make it actually human. I am very excited today to be speaking with one of my favorite people in this world, former colleague and always friend, Karina Mangu-Ward. Karina, thank you for joining me and having this conversation. I'm really excited to have you here, and I'd love to start with asking you, give us a little bit of a flavor of your experience and expertise and why this topic is important to you.
Sure. Usha, this is so fun. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Um, my name is Karina. I'm a partner at an organizational development firm called August. And the way I talk about my experience is I've spent the last, 10, 15 years trying to help humans work better together. My work is all about the notion that teamwork is really messy and really hard, especially inside the kinds of organizations I work with that are big and bureaucratic. But that it's possible for teamwork to be wonderful and joyful and thriving and good for people and good for outcomes. And I have been really, really focused on the human side of work for a long time now. And the way I've been thinking about this moment for me is that after all this time spent helping humans work better together, I think the task of the next decade for me is to help humans figure out how to work with machines. And I am excited about that and also kind of grieving the past, but I'm a techno pragmatist. And so my view is it's here with us now. So let's figure out how to be with it in the way that serves us and our aims the best.
I love that. I think one of the things that has been a consistent theme for me on this podcast is AI is another team member. It is not a technology in the traditional sense of like a tool that you go and use. In terms of its capability, it's very much a whole new set of capabilities that come online that, you know, and I think it opens up a whole new world of like what does it mean for us? What are we good at that we should be doing more of? And what are we like not optimized to do that we should be doing less of and like outsource to this other team member that works 24/7 and doesn't complain? And and we still have to work with each other, like we're still the decision makers. We're still the ones setting direction. And what does that mean and what does that look like? So I know like we've done a lot of work around decision making, and I know that's like a passion for both of us, and I think that's going to be alive for a while.
Decision making's not dead, and human decision making and human judgment is, I think, more vital than ever. When I think about the durable skills that humans need in an AI world, judgment is the top one. And the way I think about it, Usha, probably 2 years ago, I was like on the stump speech, being like, treat AI as your teammate, AI is your teammate. And then I talked to some more people who were like, don't talk about it that way. It's a tool. Like we need to recenter humanity and like talk about the fact that it's a tool. And so I like dance around that a little bit, but what I know for sure is that it's intelligence on the team. It's a new kind of intelligence at the
Yeah.
table that is different than human intelligence, that has a different kind of cognitive memory processing ability that we don't have.
Yeah.
And that I think is really transformative. But what I want to be clear with myself about is that it's not human intelligence, it's machine intelligence that has a whole different set of underlying principles to it. And I want to get smart about what that is and how it's different from human intelligence so that I know how to work with it.
Yeah, I I buy that. I think that's a really astute point that it is intelligence, and I think that's kind of what I'm getting at with like it's a new team member, which is like it's not just like a platform or a thing that you use, but actually something that kind of pushes you to reimagine the work that you're doing, and reimagine like how you might get from point A to point B. Like we don't have to keep following the same route and use this tool to make it a little bit better. We can actually now chart whole new courses that run in very different ways. And I think in that sense, it's almost, it's extremely intelligent. in that sense. But yeah, I also hear you on the like centering humans piece.
There's something about that when this person I was talking to was an art curator said that, and I was like, I don't think I buy it, but it's provocative and it's
Yeah.
interesting, and I want to pay attention to how I conceptualize the hierarchy between me as a human and the tools.
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole that I'd love to go down with you some point. But for now, I'd like to start with what does AI mean in the context of high performing teams? I know that's something you're interested in. You have a book coming out around that. I'd love to learn more about how you're thinking about it in the context of building high performing teams.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I do have a book coming out. It's called Teams That Meet the Moment. It comes out in May 5th of 2026, so we're getting really close. And I started writing it before AI was so huge, and it's a book absolutely about the human elements of it. And it's a book about how do we get ourselves organized, get the right people in the room. That still matters, but here's something that I actually think is changing. One of the practices in the book, and one of the most valuable practices I've done ever, is the team charter, which is where you write down who needs to be in the room and what roles do they need to embody. And we've long had this rule of 7 ± 2. You want a team that's 7 people, but between 5 and 9 is okay. I think that's one of the things that AI is going to change, because it used to be if I need more expertise on the team, I need another body in the room. And then the conundrum becomes, oh, the team's getting too big to be functional in the human dynamics of teaming. Because as soon as the team gets too big, it's really difficult to function inside. And so I think having intelligence at the table, having specialization at the table without having to have a human bring that, really 10x is the capability of high performing teams, because it comes then without the unrewarded complexity of so many more people to be building relationships with and communicating with, because it's not another human. Now, the downside of that is less jobs, less seats for people, less, human judgment with that intelligence. But I'm really curious about how not having to add a person to the team, the intelligence on the team, is going to change things.
Yeah, I think I think there's so much in there. I'm kind of stuck on the less jobs piece, and it's an interesting one. I think we're living through that. I think, to be determined what that actually looks like. But there's also a world in which like there's more things that we are now capable of doing and now we can do. So maybe there's more teams doing more, pursuing more missions rather than less jobs. We don't know. And that's a whole other decision point
That's
that many boardrooms.
I think, right? Like, I think the excitement about being a leader inside an organization right now is you get to decide whether you're going to play small or play big. And playing
Yeah.
small looks like, okay, less people at the table doing the same work. And playing big looks like we can be bolder in our ambitions and try to use this technology to marshal towards that. And Ethan Mollick has talked a lot about this, and it's been very inspiring to read about. But that's kind of my North Star when I'm working with organizations on this. How can we be bolder rather than smaller?
Yeah, the frame that, I really hold with this is that, the first organizations were factories. And so there's a very clear kind of point A to point B. And here's, people were essentially the robots, on the conveyor belt, making things move from point A to point B. But a lot of the work right now doesn't fit that model anymore. We have knowledge workers. We have people fundamentally creating things and imagining things. And we're still kind of treating people, I think, with an outdated mindset. And my hope is that this is a push to really reimagine how to get from point A to point B, and to actually reimagine what is point B, what may point B even look like now.
Yeah.
If we go back to the core mission, actually, of what is it that we want to create and what do we want our customers to experience, now there's just so much more in terms of what that might look like and how you might get to that. But my caution is that a lot of the what do we want out of this endeavor as an organization is often still so centered around profit that I don't know that we're always going to be. That's a whole humanity
Well,
question.
it's the same question as what is B? What is point
What
B?
is B? Yeah.
Um, I'm
Yeah.
laughing because this we had a whole what is B conversation 10 years ago. Um, but the question of what does this technology allow us to believe is actually possible? And
Mhm.
rather than what does this technology allow us to do to get to where we're already going, I don't
Yeah.
see a ton of organizations as I'm out training on AI and doing immersions and talking to executives that are quite thinking about it that
Yeah.
way. I think that's going to require more cultural role modeling and more like theory and research and pushes to move humanity in that direction.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to kind of ground this a little bit more. So tell me more about what you are noticing around decision making when it comes to AI adoption.
Yeah, I'm out there. I've been working with a lot of organizations for the last 10 years and kind of keeping up with all of their conversations right now about AI. And I see like a bifurcation in the way that leaders are approaching it. Often within single leadership teams. This is a dynamic I'm now observing over and over, where there's like one leader on a pole who is so enthusiastic about the technology that they want to break all of the decision making protocols and just get going, like sort of like break down caution, be more risk forward, and like let people use tools, say that's okay. Um, and others who are really decision making from a deep place of fear, like really grounded fear that I understand makes a lot of sense to me, but that shows up as almost like paralysis. And I've been thinking about the metaphor of leaders that want to build walls. So that means like literally sometimes that's firewalls, like blocking every possible tool. Um, or decision making walls, like you have to convince a committee of 13 people if we want to adopt any particular, process walls, and saying, the reason we're doing that is to protect people's jobs. And that is like a really, really, I think, important fear to be holding on to. But the reality is, if AI is a tidal wave, it's gonna knock that wall down. Like it's coming anyway. And I think the best version of the organizations who are enthusiastic understand that the job of the leader is to figure out how to build the boat. Like, what's the vessel? How do I create spaces of safety so people like aren't sinking or swimming with this technology? They don't feel fearful about looking foolish. They don't feel fearful about losing control. They don't feel fearful about immediate job loss. They're not fearful about getting burnt out from having to do another thing on top of everything else. And they understand that like the ground is shifting and the boat's going to take you somewhere else. But they're building it together. And there's a little part of me that worries that enthusiasm is actually just masked fear, that like I'm enthusiastic because I'm so afraid of getting left behind. But I also think that there's genuine enthusiasts who just see the vision and see the promise and want to bring people along in the most generous way possible. And that, I don't know, that excites me. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think, I'm thinking of that from a personal lens before I answer that question of like my own journey of being a little bit skeptical at first of like, what is this? Like the first time I heard ChatGPT, I'm like, what? And I also heard it from somebody that I was mildly annoyed by. So I kind of dismissed the whole thing.
Must
But
be change management. Like, don't have the people who are annoying be the champions of it.
and this is really early days, and now like it's such a partner for me in so much of what I do, both in my work and in my personal life. And I use it in particular ways that I am both excited about and relieved by. And there are so many times when I'm like, is this like replacing connection? Like I go to Claude whenever I'm like, just help me think something through, like help me understand, help me see more perspectives. But I continually, I don't know, there's something about the fear that feels like important. and like important to hold and be vigilant about. And also like there is this fear of like, well, if I don't use it, I'm going to be left behind. So it's a real tension in terms of the fear. The thing that I'm seeing that gives me hope is that there are a lot of people and a lot of leaders that I'm working with that are really focused on how do we build people's capability around these tools so that what we have is just people who are better at what they're doing. And we are actually empowering people to reimagine how things get done. And it just unlocks this whole world of possibilities of, we don't have to just do things the way we always did before. We don't have to take a whole bunch of things for granted before. And that kind of empowerment is something that I really champion and love, and fundamentally believe in, that actually the people closest to the work should be able to make the decisions that they need. This is something we both believe. So that's the piece that I'm really enjoying. The piece that does worry me, two things that worry me, is definitely the enthusiasm to cut jobs. And there's some nuance there for me, because I do think this will reduce the number of people required to get some work done. And I think from a business perspective, I understand that. And, I think that's an okay choice to make at the level of the business. And we have to make some decisions at the level of society overarching that. My worry with that is that there's not that much intention or nuance around who do we cut? Why do we cut? What roles are no longer required? And that we're missing this piece around like, we may still want the people and need the people. The people may now be doing different things, but the
Yeah.
roles are no longer, So what I'd like to see more of is the separation of role and person, and really clear intention around um, defining the point B.
Yeah.
Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And how do we get there in an intentional way? And my worry is a lot of times the call is coming from boardrooms saying, go do AI. And the way that it's being done is it's creating more noise than not.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I think, again, like fine and fair, growing pains, working our way through it. But
Yeah, all
that's what
that
I would
really
say.
resonates. I come back again and again to the idea that work is being eliminated, which doesn't mean that jobs are being eliminated. And the ability to just discern which of those is which, and a commitment, you know, I'm thinking about your like organizational layer, societal layer piece, and I'm interested in holding organizations more accountable to societal outcomes, because I
Yeah.
think that the locus of control, power, agency, direction right now sits
Yeah.
in boardrooms and executive rooms in terms of the fate of many people's employment. And this is the moment for those leaders to say, let's decide to be more ambitious. Let's decide to widen our scope. Let's decide to do more for society. And obviously, government has a role to play, and culture, like the societal layer is real. But and maybe this is because I've devoted my entire career to working on institutions, and I really believe in the power, for good or for bad, of institutions to shape our direction. So my call to leaders is to use that locus of control to do good work, to give people meaningful jobs, and to be more ambitious for our mutual gain. I don't know if that's possible, but I want to hold on to that. And
I
I
love
also,
that.
Usha, it is making us more lonely. Like it's
100%.
it is absolutely, social media robbed us of our attention, and AI is robbing us of our connection. But that's why I'm really, really passionate about what I think is going to happen in the next year, which is a set of tools that are tuned less for individual use and more for team use. And that teams that so thinking like the mindset shift I'm interested in is AI is for individual productivity, to thinking about AI is for team productivity, team performance, team intelligence. And like the dumb example of this is lots of people are using note takers and doing all of that privately and having all of their intelligence
Right.
privately, but like, and it's a little grindy and hard, but figuring out how to help teams keep the intelligence of all of the record keeping of their work and their conversations and their decisions in a central repository that everyone has equal access to query. That to me is the new knowledge management, where everything is available to you to get insights and synthesize and like look at team dynamics. And the tools aren't quite good enough yet. And the process is hard, but I want folks, anybody in a team asking, how can I shift from the individual use to the collective use that is visible, work in public, learning oriented? Because I think that gets the value of the tools without making us so dang lonely in the way that we're using them.
Yeah, I think on the tool front, I completely agree. And I think it's actually a huge game changer for how teams come together and how multiple people come together, you know. Like if I was a manager, as an example, I would just give the transcripts of all my one-on-ones and say, in this organization, this is what good leadership looks like. This is the kind of leadership I'm trying to aspire to, you know, those being two different inputs. Tell me what I can do differently, you know? So there are these like incredible use cases that I don't think we've like fully tapped into quite yet. And there's a lot of possibility in that. The other piece is I think, you know, one of the reasons we are so disconnected is a lack of time. And there is a world in which this can free up sometimes so that we can, I mean, why are we disconnected is a much more complex equation than that. But I do think time
It's part of it.
is a huge part of it, you know. And you're definitely one of the people who like, you know, we've been colleagues and we've had amazing times together and we have to fit that in between all of the other things that go on, right? And what does it look like to just be more spacious as humans? I think is a really wonderful question for all of us to hold. And I like the call to hold organizations more responsible. And the thing that I want to say as part of that is it's not just for, you know, the sake, you're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart so that your employees feel better and have security. It's not just that. It's also when you refocus in that way, you can serve your customers in whole new ways that you haven't even imagined and that you can't only imagine in the boardroom or in the executive room. What you're doing now is actually capitalizing on the intelligence of your entire organization and like creating space for ideas to come from any part of the organization and actually to take traction by testing, learning, and creating. And so I think there's a boldness behind this that is actually in service of the good of all.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I think, well, yeah, I, it's interesting because I've long said that exceptional teamwork is both good for people and good for outcomes. And that is a rare combination. Often feels like there's a trade-off or a zero-sum game between those. And I wonder if AI isn't the same. Like the most exceptional use of AI inside organizations should be our bar should be this is both really good for people and really good for outcomes. And anything that is aspires to less than that, I don't know, maybe we should filter out or consider not aligned to our direction.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the mindset underlying it, which is I do think we have a mindset that it's a zero-sum game, you know.
Yeah.
And I do think we have very noisy and loud voices kind of in the organizational space and beyond that are championing that. But I think part of it is shifting that. And along those lines, my final question to you is how do we share the value that AI generates back with people? Because the truth is, the only reason this thing is as intelligent as it is because it's got access to an enormous amount of wisdom that's already been generated.
Yeah. I wish I had a nice, neat take on this. What I know is that it's the right question because
Mm.
if AI is gaining us things, and I think there's a widespread fear out there. I've heard you say this, that this just enriches the few, and the rest of us like don't have any work. I think there's a world in which particularly inside organizations, a lot of thought is put into how do we share the benefits back. And I think there's a really wide spectrum of what that could look like. You know, burnout's a major problem. So saying, what the thing we're sharing back is time. We're not expecting you to do as many hours, do the same amount of work in less hours, and what you get back is your time. I was reading a case of a company that committed explicitly that as they did their AI push, they were going to reinvest a certain percentage of margin gains that they believed were generated by AI into learning and development and comp increases, which is to me like really closing directly a feedback loop. And I think that that sets off the possibility for a virtuous cycle where people are excited to share their gains with organizations because they know they're going to get them back. Who's excited to share a gain with an organization that's going to take it and run? And that's bad for people and bad for outcomes. And I think if we can set up this virtuous cycle, whether it's new career paths, lower caseloads, more learning, better pay, I don't know. I'm excited about the possibility of that. I don't know that that is on the minds. That's not heavily on the minds in that way of the leaders that I'm talking to right now. Not
Yeah. And I think that's because of the way that the ethos is around all of this, you know. And so I love that you brought that question forward. I think it's absolutely the right question for us to be asking. There's also this piece that I heard that I'd have to look into a little bit more to understand fully, but there is this piece of like, there is a world in which it's going to run out of data because we're not generating as much anymore because we're relying on it. And actually, it relies on us and us creating and us having wisdom. And the other thing that I want to say too, and I hold this as a question, but I do think when people come together, novel things come into the world in a way that I don't know that AI can quite get there yet because it's always using existing data sets. I don't think as people we have the same limitation.
No, did you that there's a Procter and Gamble study that proved this basically. They did a study where they set up four scenarios. Person collaborating alone with AI, two people collaborating with each other, no AI, two people collaborating with AI, and another one I can't remember. The point is that all of the results of the output of these various collaborations were, heavily graded and rated and checked by humans, and like a massive percentage of what were considered the breakthrough ideas were generated by the teams of two humans and the AI, and that the two humans and the AI outperformed just the AI or just the one human or the two people working without AI. So it's one study, but I'm like holding on to that for dear life, a belief
Yeah,
that the quality, the creativity, and the rigor of our work
yeah.
requires collaboration plus the added intelligence of this technology. And like I'm gonna die on that hill for now until data says anything else.
I'm with you right on that hill. And I just fundamentally believe in like the beauty of like human creativity and human innovation and human art. There's something about the ways in which we bring things into being that didn't exist before that I think will always be incredibly beautiful. And that might be the note that we end on. Any closing thoughts? Any advice for the leaders out there that who are holding all these questions?
No, I think that's a nice note to end on. Like there's something always intrinsically creative about us that can't be replicated by machines. And also, let's take responsibility for that reality. Let's take responsibility as leaders in organizations and believe that we can influence all of this. Like, that's what lets me sleep at night. So,
Yeah. And let's create a world that's, unintended, like optimized for humans. Like,
bringing it right back, Usha.
let's create a world that's actually like for us at the end of the day, you know.
Yeah,
Karina, it was such a pleasure. I had so much fun talking to you. Thank you for sharing your insights. I'm excited for your book and to hear more from you on all of these topics.
amazing. Thank you, Usha. Thanks for having me.